You're listening to Court of Flame and Ashes, written by T.L. Christianson, produced by Myth and Moon Audio. Chapter 1, Lyra. You know that moment? Just before you wake up and the day is full of possibilities. Yeah, I didn't wake up like that. I woke up shivering. My head was throbbing and my tongue was so dry that it stuck to the roof of my mouth. The first thing I noticed was the smell, that cloying scent of mildew that plagued basements and caves. Shifting on the cold, grit-covered floor, I realized that my hands were bound. I held my wrists in front of my face, trying to peer at the thick manacles, but they were shrouded in darkness. I wanted to panic, but panicking wouldn't save me. I had to take stock of the situation, observe, plan. My hip hurt, but I seemed to be intact and untouched other than a rip in my shirt. Searching my hazy thoughts, I tried to recall the last thing I remembered before waking up here. I'd gone to classes. Chem was killing me. Then my shift at the diner. Then that horrible party with Blake. Tired and irritated, I slipped away and out the back door. I ordered an Uber on my app, and I texted Blake. The excuse I gave him was lame, but I didn't care anymore. Our relationship was over anyway. Why try to fight it? But I couldn't remember how I'd been taken. The side yard was the last thing I could remember. Walking through the shadows, then that was it. I didn't remember anything after that point. Was I roofied? No, I only drank from my water bottle. But someone had obviously drugged me. At least, I was still clothed. And other than feeling a throbbing headache, a sore hip, and stiff muscles from sleeping on the ground, I was okay. But it was dark. Was it night? How long had I been unconscious? What day was it? Did this have to do with the drugs? Stupid, I muttered. I shouldn't have been alone like that at night. Gran would be so freaked out. I swallowed to moisten my parched throat, but it only made me that much more aware of how thirsty I was. Squinting into the darkness, I caught a glimpse of stone. I straightened, and something shifted inside my bra before sliding out of my shirt. My phone fell to the ground, making a dull clunk. The screen flicked on and lit up my surroundings. Several pairs of eyes stared my way from a dingy, straw-covered basement. This was human trafficking. I was getting trafficked. Horror ran through me as I frantically tapped the screen. Put that away before they see, someone hissed. Call 911, whispered another girl hoarsely. You have a phone? Came a gasping exclamation. My fingers finally sought out the emergency numbers, and I hit the call button. Then, nothing. Searching flashed in the upper left-hand screen. I licked my lips, only to taste the copper tang of blood. Great, someone had probably backhanded me already. Well, spat another female voice from the far end of the dank cavern. I stared at my phone in horror when the call ended and my home screen popped up. The picture of Gran holding up her middle finger shone back at me, and as I searched her face, tears sprang to my eyes. There's no signal, I whispered past the lump in my throat while shaking my head in denial. Reluctantly, I pressed the off button until my phone went dark. Does anyone know where we are? Asked a soft voice from beside me. She tugged on fabric that covered a metal basket on the wall, revealing several rocks that gave off a bright orange glow. The stone beneath me was damp and scattered with straw. A bit of debris stuck to my palm when I lifted it to wipe it off on my thigh. When a faint rustling came from nearby, I tucked my phone back inside my bra and pulled my knees into my chest. What was that? Probably mice. I answered in a whisper, then raised my voice. Does anyone know how they got here? Anyone remember anything about who took us? I can try to send a text with details if anyone remembers. An angry voice came out of the darkness before trailing off. All I know is that I was minding my own effing business, walking home from the library, and two guys grabbed me. A mumble of voices agreed, but didn't elaborate, and I wondered if the rest were too afraid or didn't remember their abduction, like me. What about you? The girl next to me asked. I heaved a breath out my nose before answering. I don't remember. I think I was drugged. Maybe it'll come back to me. One night, One stupid decision and now everything is down the toilet. Years of busting my ass in school, working at the diner, all for nothing. This was it. Why? Because no matter how hard I worked, it would never be enough to make up for what I'd done. I sighed again, and the smell of weed and alcohol rose from my ripped shirt, making me nauseous. Well, I tried. I tried so hard to not be like my mother. Footsteps echoed nearby, bringing me out of my misery and straight into a panic. The whispered conversations abruptly stopped as we collectively held our breath. When the heavy door creaked open, all eyes were on it. Large, muscular bodies blocked the brighter light as they moved into the room. A man stared back at me, his devilish eyes rimmed in black. He wore a strange type of red armor that looked like large snake scales. When light reflected off the iridescent surface, the curved armor shimmered. I braced myself against what they were going to do. What would they say? Was this some rich psycho's dungeon? Was this a TV series? Were we on camera? I thought, even as my gut knew that wasn't the case. Was this a slavery ring? I'd heard of girls getting abducted and sold into slavery, but who were they sold to? What became of them afterward? A booming voice pulled my attention back to the men who'd entered, but when I heard him speak, his words made my heart sink. It was no language I'd ever heard before. We all watched as one warrior neared the girl closest to the door. She screamed as he pulled her up and attached her bound wrists to a chain. "Oh, hells no!" spat a woman's rich voice from the shadows to my left. I turned to spot blue eyes shining in the dark. She stumbled to stand, but settled on getting to her knees. "Y'all is gonna have to kill me if you think I is going anywhere like that." One of the soldiers strode toward us, and I sucked in a shaky breath, trying to sink back into the shadows. His gaze lingered on me anyway before going to the woman who shouted. I watched him as he stared at her, and she stared back. The guard had long hair that hung around his shoulders in strawberry blonde waves. His hand rested on the hilt of an honest-to-God sword as he knelt and spoke softly to her in that foreign tongue. In reply, she spit in his face, the saliva landing across his cheek. Did she have a freaking death wish? I cringed, trying to ease back from whatever his reaction might be. Instead of violence or anger, his wide mouth opened into a grin, showing off straight teeth. Taking a handkerchief out from a pocket, he wiped his face while still meeting her eye. The spitter's voice took on a panicked edge. "Get me out of here!" She tugged at the chains binding her wrists. "Y'all better let me go." The guard chuckled and stood, calling out something to the other soldiers as they continued to add each girl to the chain. We were being transported. This was bad. The outspoken girl continued to shriek and yell at them, but her cries only served to make my blood grow colder. I wondered if her shriek served as a warning of things to come. When the soldier turned to add me to the chain, I struggled to stand before he could touch me. He wasn't rough like I expected. Instead, one hand held up the chain while the other clipped my bulky handcuffs to it. Then they moved on. I counted the girls in the line, 13 ahead of me and 6 behind, 20 in all. Several were crying softly, but one small girl with straight, black hair murmured a continuous prayer. Despair washed over me. No one was coming to save us. Rand's face hovered in my mind. No, I couldn't go missing like my mom. She didn't deserve this again. I ground my teeth and shook my head in irritation. I had to save myself. Daylight shone through the dank hallway outside the door. Once we were above ground, I'd try 911 again, or I'd get a text out. But I needed a backup plan. What next? What if that failed? Before I could answer my own question, we were being shuffled up a winding stone staircase. Ahead of us, a roar grew louder and louder, making my heart thump in my chest. Was it water? Were we near a river? When I glanced behind me, the spitting girl raised her eyebrows at me as if to say, "Why didn't you try to fight like I did? This is your fault." "What's going on?" questioned another. "I don't know," I whispered. "Bitch," asked the loud girl. "What the fuck you think is going on? This sure as hell ain't your goddamn birthday party." I stumbled as the chain jerked me forward toward the roaring noise. Nah, this is some modern-day slavery bullshit is what this is, she continued. Just shut up, I thought, but was too freaked out to speak. One by one, the girls disappeared through the doorway into blinding sunlight, and the noise grew louder. I followed, my feet sinking into deep sand as we strode out into the center of what appeared to be a replica of some ancient Roman Colosseum. The sun beat down on me, and I squinted at my surroundings, bringing them into focus. The noise hadn't been water, but people. They filled every spot in the stands. I had to get to my phone, but the guards kept us going at such a fast clip it would be impossible to reach for it, especially walking through the sand with my wrists bound. When our strange procession came to a halt, the first girl was removed from the chain, only to be latched to a thick post driven into the ground. My blood ran cold as I gazed around and realized there were 20 posts, one for each of us. We were being chained up inside the arena. Why? What for? I shivered in fear as shrieks and cries came from around me. 3 girls were chained, then 4. My brain froze as I realized that we were being placed around a large dark pit in the ground. Shrieks and growls floated up from the hole, only serving to intensify my panic. The loud girl had gone quiet, probably from shock, like me, but a few of the others continued to wail and jerk on their restraints. Maybe they hadn't heard the monster sounds from below ground. Goosebumps rose on my arms, and my heart thundered in my chest. My vision began to tunnel down, making me weave in place. One of the girls fell unconscious to the sand, while another cried out to the impassive faces who watched us from the now silent stadium, but none of them moved to help us. They just sat there watching as if a football game. I began searching the stands with my eyes. Someone had to help. Someone had to do something. My gaze stopped at a raised platform covered with a red canopy that flapped in the breeze. Beneath the canopy sat several richly adorned people. Most wore the red-scaled armor, similar to the soldiers, except for a dark-haired woman in front. She wore a long red toga-style dress that gaped open in the middle, showing the expanse of tan skin between her breasts. On her head was a crown. So the people in the box were royalty, but royalty of what? Was this some type of cosplay event? Turning my eyes back to the crowd, who now whispered in anticipation, I realized that they too seemed to be wearing some kind of costume. I ignored them and went for the phone. Reaching down my shirt, the manacles clanged together. Pulling the device out, I dialed 911 and held my breath, waiting for the damn thing to find a signal. One eyelid twitched over and over, so I squeezed my eyes tightly shut before opening them again. The dreaded no signal stared up at me from my screen. Then the ground shook as clicks filled the air. It sounded like a roller coaster. That scary sound it makes as you climb to the peak. Click, 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 click. Something began rising up out of the pit. Oh, hells no! Began the spitting girl, picking up her rant again. If my jaw could have hit the floor, it would have. There, in front of me, was a... Are you kidding me? There ain't no way that's a motherfucking dragon. Yep. She basically said it all. Lifting out of the ground before us was a huge, furious, and very real dragon. It was strangely beautiful in a horrific way. Her black scales shone in the sun, looking almost blue when they reflected the light. She had a row of spikes running down her back as well as horns on her head. Her large wings spanned out above us as she stood and shook the sand from her body. Her. I asked myself, my breath shallow. How did I know it was a she? I just knew. When the clicking stopped, the world went quiet. My phone slid out of my slick hands, falling to the sand. All of us girls stared in absolute terror, and the crowd looked on as what? What were they waiting for? Would this monster eat us? One of the soldiers standing in the sand near the stands shifted, the creak of leather giving away his unease. This was it. I was dead. I was going to be eaten by the most beautiful creature in existence. Those multifaceted eyes spun, and she lifted her snout to the sky and bellowed. Trying to muffle the sound, I brought my manacled hands over my head, pressing my arms to my ears. The beast looked around, probably trying to figure out which one of us it wanted to eat first. When she took a step, the ground shook. Cowering behind my post, I watched the beautiful monster. So graceful, she nearly took my breath away. When the dragon neared the opposite side of the circle, she stopped and sniffed the air. Moving toward a brunette with a tear-stained but determined face, she inhaled again. The girl screamed and began tugging at the chain, jerking it and trying to escape. But the chains kept her tethered to the post. If I had blinked, I would have missed it. The brunette was there one moment, and in the next, she was a heap on the sand. I squeezed my eyes closed against the fear. My heart galloped and I sucked in sand, making me cough. I had to calm down. If I panicked like her, then I was dead. Counting my breaths, I focused on the warmth of the post and the sand beneath my feet, trying to pretend I was on a beach, and this was the pier. But my mind kept coming back to this horrible reality. How many girls could a dragon eat? Surely not 20. Could I play dead, hide behind the post? I tried to picture a happy place, a real place. I envisioned myself sitting on the couch eating fried chicken with Gran. Cold ran the length of my body, and tears escaped from beneath my eyelids. Gran would never know what happened to me, just like my mother. I was going to die, and no one would know.